係，各位同事早晨。
Good morning, members. Are we ready?
好，有少少技術處理埋先。可以開始未？
Are we ready? Members, may I remind members that you should set your screen to landscape mode, and then please use the virtual background function of Zoom according to the Secretariat's instruction with the appropriate color. For EC members, the orange color should be used. For members returned by FC, the background should be green. And for members returned by GC, your background should be purple. So please note that. And please switch to the appropriate background color. Right, Mr. So, please see if you can change the background color. Mr. So, please see if you can switch the background color. I call to order this meeting as we have a quorum. This is a panel on public service, and we're now conducting this meeting via Zoom. Would members please note that when you speak, you should turn on the video camera function of Zoom and show your face, whereas your microphone would only be switched on my instruction. If you want to submit any paper during the meeting, please email the paper to the email account of this panel. Item 1 on the agenda, information paper issued since the last meeting. No information paper has been issued. Item 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. The next regular meeting is scheduled for the 21st of March 2022. It's a Monday at 10:45 a.m. The administration proposes to discuss the two items as follows. The budget 2022-2023 with initiatives related to civil service. Second, medical and dental benefits for civil servants, retired civil servants, and civil service eligible persons. Members, do we agree with the proposed agenda? Are there other suggestions? I see a member raising his hand. So is it a suggestion relating to the agenda of the next meeting? No? Mr. Tung Kwok? Are you going to say something about the agenda of the next meeting? If so, we'll turn your mic on. Please indicate. No? All right. Then we move on to the next item. But before we do that, any other member who has suggestion in relation to the proposed agenda for the next meeting, please just raise your hand. Don't use the raise hand function in Zoom. Mr. Leung Chee-wing, your mic is on. Thank you. Apart from the medical and dental benefit for CSEPs, I'd also like to discuss the medical benefits for serving civil servants. Civil servants are concerned about the MPF system or the Civil Service Provident Fund, and they'd like to perhaps set up a committee to oversee this matter. I'd like to have a discussion on this matter. Thank you, Mr. Leung Chee-wing. I'll reflect your view to the Bureau. But in fact, in the next item, the second proposed item relates mostly to medical and dental benefits. So let's wait for the administration's response. Any other suggestions from members? If not, we now move on to the third agenda item. Item 3. Briefing by the Secretary for the Civil Service on the Chief Executive's 2021 Policy Address. CB bracket 457/2022 bracket 01. This is the administration's paper. Other LegCo members have been invited to take part in this item. In order to allow members to speak in an orderly and fair manner, I will now invite the Secretariat staff to remove all the raise hand indicators. And now, members, please press the raise hand button in Zoom now, and I will invite members to speak in turn. Next, I will now invite Mr. Patrick Nip, Secretary for the Civil Service, to walk us through the paper. Thank you. Am I coming through? Yes. Chairman, members, good morning. I'm delighted to be able to join you at this first meeting of the panel on public service in the new term of the Legislative Council after improvement to the electoral system. Although we can only meet via Zoom, I hope that when the epidemic has subsided, we can have more opportunities to meet face-to-face and exchange views with members on public service affairs, so that we can all contribute to building a civil service which is patriotic, loyal, professional, efficient, proactive, responsible, and diligent. The first item on the agenda is policy measures relating to Civil Service Bureau featured in the 2021 Policy Address and Policy Address Supplement. Details of the measures are set out in our paper submitted to the Secretariat. So I will only give some salient points here. The 2021 Policy Address focuses on developing and mapping out Hong Kong's future and puts forth a number of new measures. In order to achieve good administration and governance, so that we can implement the various measures in long-term plans to benefit the public and resolve the society's problems, the Hong Kong SAR government will enhance the effectiveness of governance in 5 aspects. They are reorganizing the government structure, attracting talents to join the government as politically appointed officials, reviewing the selection and appointment mechanism for senior levels of civil service, advocating dedicated positions with specific responsibilities, and enhancing the government's capability in information dissemination and public communication. To allow the civil service to zealously embrace the opportunities and challenges of the new era, the Civil Service Bureau will strengthen the main elements of the management of the civil service, including recruitment, training, and the selection and appointment mechanism for senior civil service positions. First, on review of the basic law test in civil service recruitment, in order to ensure that new recruits to the civil service will have basic understanding of the basic law and the national security law, we are reviewing and updating the assessment content of the basic law test and will include the national security law in the scope of assessment to render the test better suited to the requirements of the relevant civil service posts. We expect to incorporate the new assessment content in the basic law and national security law tests from the middle of this year onwards. On strengthening civil service training, the government is taking forward the Kwun Tong Composite Development Project, including the construction of the Civil Service College and other facilities. Funding approval was obtained from the Legislative Finance Committee on the 8th of October last year. The construction works are expected to commence this year, and subject to the actual progress of the works, the composite development is expected to be completed by phases beginning from the end of 2026. Once again, I'm grateful for members' support. Pending commissioning of its long-term accommodation in Kwun Tong, the government established the Civil Service College on the 9th of December last year. The interim accommodation is located in the North Point Government Offices, NPGO, and is the premises of the former Civil Service Training and Development Institute. The facilities of the premises have been upgraded and refurbished. Meanwhile, the recruitment exercise of the head of the college is underway. By way of conducting an open-come-in-service recruitment exercise, we look forward to appointing a suitable candidate to the post in the first half of this year to steer further development of the college and drive the efforts of delivering various initiatives on the front of civil service training. Apart from hardware, the government also strives to enhance the software, that is, the training courses. The Civil Service Training Advisory Board will examine 4 areas of civil service training, namely national studies in the basic law, leadership development, innovation, technology applications, and international collaboration. The board will map out the way forward for enhancing training in the respective areas. The 2021 Policy Address Supplement proposes 4 new initiatives to enhance the understanding of civil servants on our country's development and the Hong Kong SAR's constitutional order. First, we will strengthen training for civil servants on the country's constitution, the basic law, and the national security law. With the establishment of the Civil Service College and upon resumption of normal cross-boundary flow of people between Hong Kong and the mainland, we will continue to enhance training in this area, both in breadth and depth. This is the focus of our training, and will establish a more systematic training framework and designate training programs for mandatory attendance, so as to enhance the understanding of civil servants on our country's development and the Hong Kong SAR's constitutional order. Second, on the front of national studies training, we'll also arrange for more middle and senior level civil servants to take part in national studies programs or thematic visits in the mainland that suit their ranks as they advance in their career. We'll also expand the civil service staff exchange program between Hong Kong and the mainland to cover the mainland municipalities in the Greater Bay Area. This will provide our civil servants with the opportunity to experience more deeply the development of the GBA cities, so as to enable them to play a more active role in the development in their respective areas of work. Third, we'll enhance training for civil servants in learning more about the country's foreign affairs through close collaboration with the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Hong Kong SAR to deepen their understanding of the international scene and the country's positioning. This will enable them to act better in concert with the country's foreign affairs policy. On the 17th of December last year, the Civil Service College and the OCMFA jointly held a thematic briefing session on international landscape and China's foreign relations in 2021, delivered by the Commissioner, Mr. Liu Guangyuan. Starting from January this year, the college would run in collaboration with the OCFMA a series of monthly talks. The first talk of the series took place on the 27th of January this year. The topic of the talk was in-depth study of Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy for a brighter future of Hong Kong, and was delivered by the Director General of the Policy Planning Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Miao Deyu. Fourth, we'll jointly design and organize with Peking University the Master Program in Public Policy and arrange senior civil servants to attend. The inaugural program will be launched in September this year. The duration is 2 years, with the first year to be attended in the Peking University, and will continue to sponsor senior civil servants to attend the Project of Hong Kong Public Administrative Talents Executive Master of Public Administration Program, Tsinghua University, so as to broaden their horizons and enhance their expertise in public administration. On review of the selection and appointment mechanism for senior levels of civil service, all along, civil service appointments are based on the principle of open and fair competition. The most meritorious and the most suitable persons are selected to fill civil service vacancies. Directorate civil servants not only take up leadership positions, but also play a crucial role in the effective implementation of government policies. In the new era, we need a governing team which is patriotic, loyal, professional, efficient, proactive, responsible, and diligent. The Civil Service Bureau will continue to uphold the principle of meritocracy while reviewing the existing selection and appointment mechanism for the senior levels of the civil service. In the coming months, we'll focus our work on a few areas. We'll review and clearly delineate the requirements for directorate civil servants. We will review the appraisal arrangements for them. We'll identify suitable posts and look into the feasibility of widening the scope of grades and ranks that could be considered for promotion to such posts, and to conduct in-service or open recruitment on a pilot basis. We will also consider, amongst others, appointing the relevant directorate officers on civil service agreement terms and providing an appropriate level of remuneration package to encourage and aspiring officers to apply. We aim to appoint visionary and competent officers with integrity to the most suitable positions. On enhancing civil service medical and dental benefits, the government launched a pilot scheme on civil service Chinese medicine clinics in March 2020. 2 civil service Chinese medicine clinics have been set up at the Chinese medicine clinics training and research centers in the Eastern and Xinjiang districts. The pilot scheme has been very well received by civil service eligible persons, or CSEPs. We expedited the review of the pilot scheme and regularized it in October 2021. The annual service capacity would be enhanced from 63,000 discs currently to around 100,000 discs by 2022-23 by way of increasing the capacity of the 2 Chinese civil service Chinese medicine clinics and setting up a new clinic. In addition, a series of measures will be taken to enhance the services, including launching a designated webpage to enhance communication and information dissemination. We'll introduce a mobile app within this year for appointment booking of Chinese medicine services. The government will continue to enhance the Chinese medicine services in close collaboration with the hospital authority and the clinics to provide more comprehensive civil service medical benefits to CSEPs in the long run. Other policy initiatives relating to civil servants are set out in the paper, and I will not repeat them here. Of course, at the moment, we are in midst of the most serious situation of the epidemic, and our top priority, of course, is to fight the epidemic. We've been constantly deploying more manpower within the civil service to cope with the anti-epidemic work of the government. We also appeal to the public to join hands with us to fight this battle so that we can return to normalcy as soon as possible. That concludes my speech, and I'll be happy to take questions and comments from members. Thank you.
咁咧，
Thank you, Secretary. Let me read out the list of members who put up their hands. Each member shall have 4 minutes. Question answers included. First, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Mr. Lee Chen Kung, Mr. Hao Siu Chung, Tony Che, Mr. Rodney Chan, Mr. Lai Tong Kwok, Mr. Lam Lam, Ms. Len Chi Wing, Ms. Mackie Chen, Mr. Elizabeth Kwok, and myself. Now, 4 minutes per round. I will be very strict with the time limit. I noticed that in other meetings, which were conducted remotely, were quite long. I will have to cut off at 4 minutes. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Chairman. Well, the Secretary mentioned that the CSB shall review on the recruitment of senior positions based on the meritocracy principle. I noticed that the Director of Information Service has been acting by the Deputy Director for 2 months. At this moment of fighting the epidemic, the Director of Information Management and Public Relations plays a very crucial role. Well, Legislative members and different parts of the community have spoken out against the performance of this office holder, that the government has lacked will need improvement on disseminating information and promoting Hong Kong. May I ask Secretary, is it because due to lack of suitable candidates or nobody willing to take on the post? So will the government consider open recruitment? The paper mentions that the Civil Service Exchange Program will be extended to Greater Bay Area cities so that the civil service can develop a deeper understanding and experience the GBA cities themselves. I would like the Secretary to explain about this program. And to what level on ranking would this program be open to? And any news on about a segment to the GBA municipalities? So 2 questions. First, on information dissemination and public relations. I admit that more needs to be done and with plenty of room for improvement. In the policy address, well, we need to enhance our capability in the public communication. Each bureau shall need to do its job better, and while will be better coordination. As for the staffing arrangements for individual posts, we shall deal with it internally. As for the director of the Information Service Department, well, is currently well, the deputy director is currently acting in this position. Will conduct an in-service recruitment. The work is underway. On the civil service exchange program, well, all along we have such programs in different parts of the city. Well, we'd like to extend the interaction with GBA cities, especially in policy areas that's part of the GBA and outline plan. We shall dispatch some civil servants to some of the GBA cities. Well, actually, what we find to do will be an enhanced internship and exchange in GBA cities, where they will spend a few months to gain in-depth knowledge and exchange with the mainland officials, which will benefit their future work. Well, we are truly discussing with the HKMAO and the different municipalities, governments. There should be middle and senior rank colleagues who had a crucial role in the GBA development. As for the civil servants of different ranks, there are national studies program, and these will be strengthened as well. One more thing. I hope that we can have a new director of the ISD reporting to work soon, because we do need him or her at this moment of time. Next, Mr. Li Wei-kung. I welcomed most of the measures outlined in policy address, especially of interfacing with the mainland. This really fills the gap since unification with the motherland. And how do we dovetail with the national planning and conduct real-time exchange on the national affairs? I hope you can provide some real-time information to us. Well, we all care about the KPIs in civil service positions and public organization positions. Let's say we allocate funding for these positions, and very often we don't know what they have done or at all. I hope that in future you can establish some key performance indicators for legislative members and the public to oversee their work, and on, for example, how many objectives you have achieved or haven't achieved, and so on. And on the meritocracy selection principle, to push the civil service to perform better, we need to strike a balance. For example, on morale. Well, compared to in-service and open recruitment, that do you give priority to internal candidates, and do you have any scoring criteria? What kind of positions will be selected through open recruitment? As we all know, the government will be restructured soon. How many manpower would you expect to add? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Lee. 3 questions. First, on the issue of the KPI. Well, the nature of government's work is different from the private sector companies. In our budget, each policy bureau and department would establish KPIs relevant to their ambit. These are quantifiable KPIs for the public and the legislature to supervise. And at department levels, we usually act on the whole, and we usually evaluate the results to whether we can hit certain benchmark. If we centralize to each, concentrate on each civil service, that we focus on the appraisal report. Well, the appraisal will determine on the work for the coming year and decides on the weighting of different factors. And when it comes to appraisal, they will review based on the factors agreed. If we finally introduce any new method or practice that can be applied to the civil service ranks, I'm happy to keep an open mind and discuss with members on this. And on the review on the selection and appointment of senior civil servants. Well, out of 180,000 civil servants, we had about 1,500 senior officials. We look at the job nature and the requirement to see if there's any room let's say that besides the current practice only promoted from a grade below, we can consider tapping into other grades. We need to look at what kind of positions that can be selected in service and what can be openly recruited. It very much depends on the job nature. This is a review process. For example, the Civil Service College, after review, will conduct a in-service open recruitment approach. This will be conducted simultaneously. And for the Commissioner for the Greater Bay Area, this is an in-service selection. For the Commissioner for Belt and Road, can be openly recruited. You can see this very much depends on the job nature that require tapping into different expertise. And thirdly, on the government restructuring, since the restructuring proposals are just proposals at this point, well, after the new CE is elected, he or she will decide the next step. Therefore, we don't know about the details. Well, the concept is clear that redivide the work among different policy bureaus and try to have as less changes as possible. That since it's simply a redivision of labor, therefore I anticipate there will not be a major boost in the staffing establishment. Mr. Chow Siu Chung. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Knit, Happy New Year. Well, the pilot scheme on civil service Chinese clinic has been very popular for the CSEP with very high utilization rate. And I got the feedback that they never managed to get through their booking hotline. I appreciate the Secretary decided to regularize this scheme with more measures to improve its operations. As an interim measure, will you consider suggestions from the union members? Of the 18 clinics operated by the HA and other providers, would you consider buying service quotas for short-term relief? To achieve a good governance, I believe that we need to improve the civil service morale. And for those who are appointed after year 2000, would you consider offering healthcare benefits after retirement?
Thank you, Mr. Chow. 2 questions. First, on Chinese medicine services. Indeed, Chinese medicine services are well received by civil servants, and we conducted a review expeditiously of the pilot scheme and regularized it. At the moment, there are constraints in terms of the service capacity offered by the civil service or Chinese medicine clinics cum training research centers. So in 2 clinics, we started providing Chinese medicine services for civil servants, and we will be setting up 2 more such clinics so as to increase service capacity. As for the 18 centers, to respond to your suggestion of buying places or discs. Now, first of all, in light of the overall service capacity, there won't be a lot of available discs, and we will also be creating a misconception since the service is also available to the public. So at the moment, our strategy is to increase the annual service capacity from 63,000 discs to 100,000 discs by 2022-23, so that we can increase the capacity of the 2 civil service Chinese medicine clinics and set up a new one. We understand there is demand for the service. In terms of service quality, we have made certain improvements upon feedback by users. For example, we set up an appointment booking system so that users can book in advance without having to wait for a long time. Now, about civil servants who join the civil service after year 2000 and that they should be entitled to medical and dental benefits as well. This is a major decision. In fact, the decision was made after the 1999 reform. Now, we understand, of course, for civil servants who are appointed after year 2000, they are not entitled to medical benefits upon retirement. And this may somewhat affect their incentive or our strategy to retain talents. However, this is a major decision to make because of the major financial implications. We will take a cautious approach in considering the issue. Thank you. Next, Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. The Hong Kong SAR government has all along rolled out facilitation measures to benefit the public. At the moment, we depend on the 180,000 civil servants to implement these policies. But I'm afraid to say that there is a rather negative perception of the civil service among the public. They have a feeling that the efficiency is low, and you may recall, Secretary, that I asked a written question in October last year, and according to your reply, last year the discipline mechanism was initiated against 19 civil servants, and 2 civil servants in the end were ordered to retire. But I wonder if the figure actually shows the prevailing practices within the civil service and the public perception. Paragraph 21 refers to reviewing the selection and appointment mechanism for senior levels of civil servants. May I ask why this only applies to directorate levels and not all ranks of civil servants? You should review the promotion and selection mechanism for all levels of civil servants so as to enhance efficiency. Apart from being a regulator, the government should also be a facilitator so that the civil servants will not be criticized of having a risk aversion culture and low efficiency. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the 3 questions. These 3 questions are related. There are various initiatives relating to the civil service, especially those in the policy address, and there are initiatives to undertake economic development and improving people's livelihood. These initiatives must be implemented with the help of civil servants. About the prevailing perception about civil service, of course, we understand that there are always criticisms On the other hand, I appeal to your understanding that as far as public services are concerned, we do win the hearts of the people in some aspects. If you take a look around the world, in terms of government services in other countries, by comparison, we do find our fleet to be efficient and providing good service. Improvement is always needed. That means we should work on the system itself, because the whole system affects morale and work performance. So, like I explained just now, we work on recruitment, training, appointment, selection mechanism. We take a holistic approach to make improvement. That is why, in terms of the review of selection and appointment mechanism for senior levels of civil service, we would focus on directorate civil servants because they take up leadership positions. If we have good leaders, we can boost the effectiveness of the work of the whole team. We have a large establishment, 180,000 civil servants, and we have 1,500 directorate civil servants. And that's the basis of our review of the selection and appointment mechanism, so that it's a starting point for our improvement to boost efficiency. In terms of management, we also work on disciplinary matters in a sense that we work with policy bureaus and departments. For non-compliant colleagues who have breached our requirements, we would make sure that the proceedings are conducted in a fair and just manner and a timely manner. We also consider how we strike the most suitable balance. So, in reviewing the selection and appointment mechanism for directorate posts, apart from finding suitable persons, we'll also consider the appraisal arrangements and promotion arrangements for directorate civil servants. Mr. Ronald Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary just mentioned that for newly recruited civil servants, they will need to undertake the basic law and national security law tests so that they have a good understanding of both. However, for serving civil servants, we should also make sure they have adequate knowledge. So will you require serving civil servants to undertake the test? And if the answer is yes, how long do you expect all civil servants to complete this test? Just now, another member mentioned expansion of the Civil Service Staff Exchange Program to cover GBA cities. But for 2 years, we haven't been able to go to the mainland. Will there be alternatives as far as the exchange program is concerned? For example, can we go online for the civil servants to get an up-to-date understanding of the mainland's development and step-up training? Now, at the moment, the Civil Service College interim accommodation is in North Point. I want to know whether you have online courses in place of physical courses. I don't think you will run face-to-face courses at the moment. So to make sure you can send large numbers of civil servants to undergo training, will you consider online training? Now, on enhancing civil servants' understanding of the basic law and the national security law, we do accord priority. So, all candidates are required to take the basic law common recruitment test, but the new requirement is that you need to pass the basic law test before you can proceed to the next round of recruitment. And we also incorporate content of the national security law in the test. Now that's for new recruits. Now, after the new recruits have worked for 3 years and upon passing probation, they will be changed to permanent terms, and we have new arrangements in this regard. For the 3-year probation period, these new civil servants will be required to undergo basic training of the basic law and the national security law so that they have a basic understanding. So they will be required to attend on a mandatory basis certain courses as a requirement for passing probation. As for the 3-year agreement term after passing probation, these civil servants will move up the training ladder to take the intermediate course to enhance their understanding of the basic law and the national security law. So we'll continue to review the effectiveness, and we will make sure more civil servants are trained, as this is a priority. Now, your point on the exchange program is valid. Every year we have different national studies program and other exchange programs now put to a halt because of the epidemic. Now, basically, we're discussing with the Guangdong municipal government to continue to expand the civil service staff exchange program to cover GBA cities. Meanwhile, we do have alternatives. For example, we have local talks and courses, and we also run online courses hosted by mainland speakers and professors. We also step up training resources online. For example, we have CLC Plus, which is a training website for civil servants. In 2021, the hit rate was close to 360,000, with the number of users hitting 840,000. And the hit rate for 2020 was close to 6 million. So this will be our direction of enhancement. Mr. Lai Tong-kwok. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to speak on civil service training. You've set up a new unit, but so far we haven't heard of the actual scope of work of this training institution, including the courses available, the instructors appointed, the effectiveness of the training courses, and whether tests would be needed. Now, Chairman, the Secretary mentioned for new recruits on probationary period of 3 years, they will be required to take the basic law and national security law tests. This seems to be the Secretary's focus. What about in-service civil servants? How should they be selected? What is the effectiveness? At the moment, we are kept in the dark. We have no idea of their approach. I remember when I was a civil servant, it was quite difficult to select candidates to undertake CSTDI courses. Sometimes we had to beg departments and units to find suitable candidates. Will it be made a mandatory requirement now for, say, promotion, and that before you are promoted, you should take certain courses and pass some tests so that you can improve the promotion and selection mechanism in an orderly manner? Thank you, Mr. Lai. Indeed, you pointed out the reality. The Civil Service College was established in December last year, and since then we have been working on 3 fronts. In terms of head of the college, recruitment is now underway, and in the first half of this year we hope to appoint a suitable candidate. The head of the college is pitched at the D6 rank. It's a directorate post. And he will be reviewing the future development of the Civil Service College. So the second point is that since the Civil Service College is formerly the CSTDI, and the head of that institute is pitched at D2 with limited manpower available. So that means we will need to create more posts, including directorate posts, to expand the establishment. Now, after running the internal procedures, we'll have to submit the proposal to LegCo and garner your support.
And thirdly, in terms of training offerings, this will be enhanced. Well, we have all along been enhancing our offerings. Looking into the future, within the first half of this year, we will announce what Mr. Lai described of an enhanced training framework, content and curriculum and focuses. Civil service at different ranks, for example, those probationers and those who became permanent and those selected for training or identified as having potential for leadership posts. The training framework will be different. Within the probation period, there will be some basic training. These will be mandatory. Upon the passing of this course, then they can pass the probation bar. And if you want to be considered for promotion, there will be some kind of relevant requirements. Just now, Mr. Lai said that it has been difficult to fill up the classes at CSTDI. Therefore, we want to instill a sense of importance for training for department chiefs and make sure they make time to take part in training. For example, some kind of thematic talks. Well, and late last year, we organized talks on constitutional order and basic law and so on. We invited departments to select and nominate colleagues to attend instead of just issue notification and ask people to sign up voluntarily. Well, the attendances in terms of the suitability of the attendees, and we will help to achieve this aim. And later week, hopefully we can explain it in a more systematic and holistic manner. Ms. Nixie Lam. Good morning. I would like to ask you about the KPIs. So far, I'm not seeing removing the red tape. On the first post suggested by Ms. Carrie Lam, it was stated that this government's work and collaboration of department should aim to remove the red tape. However, don't think that we have achieved this. And on the e-government, I don't think we're doing such a good job. A lot of procedures are overlapping or still staying at manual. Can the e-government or e-public administration become a priority in the civil service ranks and also become one of the KPIs? Well, I would like to, and next on problem solving, when I used to deal and check with the connection was lost. Well, there seems to be a problem with the connection. Ms. Lam, if you can hear me, can you hear me now? Okay, I'm not having a stable connection today. You need to go back a bit as we lost you briefly. I'm not done yet. In terms of problem solving, some department claims that as long as their process is perfect and they stick to the procedures, whether it's complete or not has nothing to do with them. Each time one uses the public money to solve problems, we should make sure that we can fulfill the objective in picking this problem-solving approach instead of simply going through the motions, and its success or failure had nothing to do with myself. I suppose this is relevant on establishing the KPIs. I will not go into too much detail as the Secretary had touched on this briefly. Well, he claimed that you just can't import the KPIs for the import sector and impose it on the civil service ranks. Well, in terms of moving with the times and removing red tape, we need to enhance the civil servants' awareness on how to do things smarter and better, and how to make sure that we're keeping up with the times. Well, currently, a lot of the practices are very outdated. I know that some of the departments issue some kind of digital vouchers. However, some departments don't know how to make use of the digital vouchers. This is not satisfactory. Can we do a better job on more training on technology so that the entire civil ranks can improve on e-government initiatives? Well, the central government has made it very clear on the framework for e-government. Well, they applied to e-government widely on different aspects of the work. Well, just now I talked about training and KPIs. Ms. Lam, you've overrun. Please let the Secretary to answer. Well, for the serious question you brought up, there are a few levels to this. First, you talk about on the government service provision, there might be some problems. For example, on interdepartmental or interbureau collaboration. And two, when providing public service, how do you make use of innovation and technology or e-government? Then on the governance mindset is not how loyal to procedures, but you should focus on results instead. We need to work on different levels. First, we need to reorganize the government so that we can delineate the ambit and the division work more clearly. And also we need to do better work on enhancing the coordination. On the issue of removing red tape, for the Northern Metropolis program, the policy address have outlined the whole concept and division. And on a practical level, we have put into some hard work, and that's the result of a collaboration among different departments and bureaus. So it's about the restructuring the government bureaus. And second, training is also an important component. Therefore, for the Civil Service College, well, they should be aware of their philosophy and mindset and expectation of responsibilities. And on the key training areas, make sure as we're reflecting these focuses, so we're clear about this: for objectives, first, national affairs and basic law, constitutional order, and two, leadership. Three, like Ms. Lam said, innovation and technology applications. And four, international collaboration and learning from other jurisdictions. And now we move on to KPI. In my earlier answers, we need to look where of the difference between a public and a private sector. While the civil service works as a team, I'm more than happy to listen to the suggestion and brainstorm more. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-wing. So, Secretary, in the past 2 years, the government has done a lot in fighting the epidemic and will deploy a different staff on frontline duties. And you have stopped recruiting civil servants. And currently, the pressure and the workload on civil servants has been huge. And within this ranks, some of the work arrangements, while some of them are not eligible for the special allowances, I wonder if you can act like a good employer. The government devotes some resources on the hospital authority to take care of the medical and dental benefits of the CSEPs. However, the HA simply makes up the resources on the public and the CSEPs. Well, the CSEP not enjoying the right benefits, and the public may feel that the CSEP are taking away resources from them. Can you make sure that the CSEP are getting the right share of the medical and dental benefits? Well, in the past 2 years, the government created 60,000 jobs under the job creation scheme, and about 15,000 jobs posts are unfilled. And how could you arrange the hard-hit industry practitioners to fill this remaining 15,000 posts in mid-high unemployment? Well, the grade structure review of disciplinary forces has been completed. A lot of other grades will need to be reviewed as well. So when the Secretary can act as a conscious employer so that the private sector can emulate from the public sector, so that we can enjoy more labor rights. Thank you, Mr. Leung. You raised quite a few questions. Due to time constraint, I will be succinct. First, government as the biggest employer. On the terms of employment and the welfare, we attach great importance to it, and we have established a mechanism on setting them. The government always acts in good conscience. First, the workload of the civil service as a whole is growing due to the rising demand and public expectations. In this financial year, the establishment achieved zero growth. We has not created new posts. However, we has never stopped recruiting. Well, we have a retirement or resignations, and we do need to fill the vacancies. In this financial year, we plan to recruit over 10,000 civil servants, and this recruitment is ongoing. Second, in each department, if staff need allowance due to their work under this mechanism, they are eligible to apply. This past 2 years, when we fight the epidemic, we have approved certain allowances to the departments related to fighting the epidemic on the job-related allowances. Let's say, for example, a high-risk setting or challenging work or working hours. We have dispersed this kind of allowances, and while we continue to process other applications, there is a mechanism in place. And two, related on medical and dental benefits, these benefits provided by the HA for the FHP policy, the funding to the HA is not ring-fenced to civil servants. It's simply a lump sum grant to the HA.
However, in terms of medical benefits for civil servants, we have been discussing with the hospital authority for more services, including Chinese medicine services, specialists, and other treatment services, examination services, etc., and how we can expedite the process. And we've also received views from staff unions for further discussion with the hospital authority. Fourth, on post-creation, we are going to create 60,000 more posts in 2 years. Now, we're actually in the process of recruitment. 15,000 posts are going through this process, and we also work with third-party organizations for some of these posts. We need time, and we'll try to expedite the process. Especially during the epidemic, there might be the need to create temporary posts. Finally, about the grade structure review. Grade structure review will be conducted if the conditions are met. That is, if there is a serious problem with recruitment or if there are major changes to the nature of work. Earlier, we completed the grade structure review for discipline services, and with the funding support from LegCo, we have implemented the new arrangement. Now we are reviewing the situation regarding medical officers in the Department of Health. Once conditions are met, priority will be accorded in undertaking this work. Ms. Maggie Chan. Ms. Maggie Chan. Thank you, Chairman. My question relates to Constitution and the relevant training. In order to achieve good governance, we need to uphold the principle of one country, two systems. At the same time, we also have to enhance the sense of belonging to the country. It's not just about requiring civil servants to take tests. I understand that in terms of recruitment, promotion, selection, there is nothing about Constitution. Now, Constitution authority is of utmost importance, and apart from the Constitution, we also need to study the theories of socialism with Chinese characteristics and Xi Jinping thoughts. These are important to the judicial system, such as the Department of Justice and Legal Aid Department. So your focus at the moment is the basic law and the national security law, but I don't think it is sufficient. And the more senior the civil servant is, there is all the more reason to step up training of one country, two systems principle. So, Secretary, will there be a plan? Now, for senior levels of civil servants and directorate posts, according to your opening remarks and the policy address, they should be loyal and patriotic, and they should also be of caliber, especially when we have sanctions from foreign countries and other issues at the moment. May I invite you to explain how they're required to take tests, and can you explain to me about BNO requirement, and for officials having actual conflict of interest because of having foreign assets, and will these affect the loyalty in the civil service? Thank you, Ms. Chan. First, I fully agree that training for the basic law, the Constitution, and the national security law is very important. In order to achieve long-term prosperity and stability under the one country, two systems principle, one important aspect is to enhance the knowledge of one country, two systems within the governing team, especially the civil service, so that they understand Hong Kong is part of our country and that the basic law stems from our country's constitution. They must have an accurate understanding of it. So after establishment of the Civil Service College, our priority is to step up training in this regard. For example, after implementation of the Hong Kong National Security Law in June 2020, by the end of last year, the Civil Service Bureau held 154 seminars relating to or training talks relating to the basic law, the Constitution, and the Hong Kong NSL. And we also have relevant information available on our online training platform with over 1.6 million hit rate. So this will continue to be our priority. I'm sorry, in the interest of time, let me interject. I'm not referring to training. You talked about training already. I'm talking about recruitment, selection, appointment, promotion. What about socialism with Chinese characteristics and Xi Jinping thoughts? Yes, all these are included in our training package. What about recruitment? Recruitment, I said we have a test on basic law and and the national security law. What about Constitution? It's part of our training package. What about recruitment? Recruitment, our focus is on Hong Kong national security law and the basic law. About the requirement of our governing team, the policy address delivered by the Chief Executive has spelled out the requirement very clearly. So I think it's very clear that we find it important to establish that in the civil service. What about assets requirement and BNO requirement? Well, the current policy prevails. Next, Ms. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, members have shown concern about middle to senior rank civil servants, especially their understanding of the Constitution, the basic law, and the Hong Kong NSL. And you just made it clear that for new recruits, they would need to undertake this test. What about middle to senior ranks of serving civil servants? Can you tell us clearly whether a test will be required of them? Because we want to make sure they have the proper understanding as well. Next, innovation and technology training is a must for civil servants nowadays. I've said it many times. In fact, this applies to all ranks of civil servants. They must have some knowledge of innovation technology. Take the anti-epidemic work as an example. Some civil servants are still reluctant to adopt INT. And it's like we're still in the Stone Age. You're having a hard time because we don't have the appropriate tools to help them. So we're in dire straits, and I think we need to step up training for them. The other point is about staff morale, especially for discipline services. Now, at every meeting of the panel, I would ask about the progress of legislating against insulting public officers, because we want to make sure that disciplined service officers working at the front line can carry out their duties without the fear of being insulted or humiliated. So I think the offense to be created should go both ways. A public officer should not insult a member of the public and vice versa. So may I know the progress of your legislative exercise? Thank you, Ms. Quat. You asked 3 questions. First, on constitutional order, constitution, the basic law, and patriotic and loyal, all these requirements for serving civil servants. after they've been appointed on permanent terms, should they want to be promoted, they should meet the training requirement, and in the selection process, we would also consider whether they meet this requirement. So when it comes to a senior civil servant, the relevant selection doesn't mean that senior civil servant has to take a test and score certain marks, because for senior civil servants we consider, for example, the understanding of the Constitution, their philosophy, their understanding of the government. These can be considered during their work. Next, innovation technology are important. So one of the 4 key training areas of the Civil Service College is a wider use of I&T application in delivering public services. Indeed, there is a need to be equipped with the latest I&T knowledge in delivering public service, and it is important to discuss with the sector. But to be frank, different government departments have been coming up with some innovative ideas, and we have indeed won some awards, and I'd like to just give recognition to our colleagues. Third point about legislating against insulting a public officer. I understand this issue is close to the heart of Ms. Elizabeth Quad. In fact, in the policy address, there is one item that is to study and consider whether the legislation should be amended to combat fake news and acts constitution to insulting a public officer. This is to be undertaken by the Secretary for Home Affairs. And also to consider striking a proper balance between legislating against insulting a public officer and protecting free speech. So the policy address supplement, in fact, explained the situation already. Mr. Wong. Thank you, Chairman, Secretary. Improvement to the electoral system means that the patriots administer Hong Kong, and I think this applies to civil servants as well. For electoral candidates, in the recent election, we imposed a new requirement, and that is to check whether candidates have any foreign residency. So, Secretary, should we impose the same nationality requirement on the civil servants so as to uphold the principle of patriots ruling Hong Kong? Second point, I understand some civil service unions have organized national studies in Pudong, Shan, and even in Guangdong province, we have national studies programs. Now, will you consider granting study leave for civil servants to take these national studies program? And will you consider including the participation record in the appraisal report? Finally, I'd like to praise the work of the civil servants. Many of them have taken part in the NP epidemic work, including the RTD operations. For colleagues working at the front line to fight the epidemic, will allowance be given? Thank you, Mr. Wong, for the 3 questions. First, on civil servants and especially civil servants, senior civil servants, the requirement follows the one set out in the basic law, which means at the moment we don't have a nationality requirement. But for senior directorate, civil service posts, If you have meetings outside of Hong Kong, you'll be representing the Hong Kong SAR of our country, and this is not a policy requirement per se, but I think our colleagues are aware of their position. And I think we need to engage the community in our discussion if we are to introduce this requirement. Second, on training. Apart from national studies program run by the government, I understand some labor unions also run similar programs. Now, under the existing policy, we provide certain facilitation. Perhaps I'll invite the Permanent Secretary to speak on that.
Well, for the anti-epidemic work, a lot of our colleagues are in the front line, and even with the enhanced special work arrangement, we have mobilized a lot of our colleagues to fight the epidemic. And based on their own circumstances, we'll issue the relevant type of allowances. And we usually grant the department requests. In this case, I'll let the Permanent Secretary to explain. Ms. Ingrid Yang. Currently, under the Civil Service Regulations, well, for the classes organized by the labor unions, that department can approve the staff to attend. As for those national studies classes organized by labor unions, even though under the CSR, it is not explicit in granting them permission to attend. However, we'll flexibly make use of other provisions to facilitate our colleagues to attend such classes. And most recently, we have allowed our colleagues to attend them. As for whether they should be reflected in the appraisal report, I can talk to the administrative staff, as this training record should be part of the appraisal as well. Now it's my turn. Secretary and Permanent Secretary. First, on the civil service establishment, the paper mentioned that for the past 4 years, the establishment increased by almost 20,000 at about over 190,000. A lot of departments applied for more staff. However, a few of such requests were granted. So, Secretary, how many applications you receive each year to add staff establishment versus the number of requests granted? I believe that there's a long wait to add positions. A lot of departments complain of huge workload while need to keep up with the old programs while creating new programs. This has become a pressure cooker environment. No wonder we're seeing a high number of vacancies and retirements. Just now, a lot of members mentioned about the KPI for civil servants. I believe that members not only asked for clear KPIs and also hoped there'll be a regular disclosure of KPI performance. We need to let the public know what are the objectives and allow for public oversight. For the ITB and the Policy Innovation Coordination Office, have they been taking forward the digitization of the government in order to improve the efficiency, that for easier for public to find out? Well, the Civil Service College won't be completed till 2026. However, there's an interim premise, and the college recruitment is underway. The training will cover widespread areas in terms of constitution, national security law, the basic law. As I heard from some members, that you will invite the Office of the Commissioner of the Foreign Ministry to analyze global events. Well, first we need to monitor the training content of the Civil Service College. The public is also quite interested in the foreign affairs landscape. Well, after consolidating these training materials, will they be accessible by the public? Thank you, Chairman. First, on the establishment. Indeed, in this financial year, we had zero growth. From 2017 to 2021-22, the civil service establishment increased by 19,500 and at 11%. Well, due to the prevailing economic circumstances as well as the current establishment size, at March, the size is close to 200,000. Therefore, we need to contain the growth. That's why we have this policy of zero growth. Internally, we have this resource allocation and exercise that the two bureaus and the Treasury and the CSB will examine the department's requests. Since this is an internal allocation exercise, therefore, we will not divulge to the public. The results are usually reflected in the upcoming financial year and through the staffing arrangements. In any case, the establishment can grow indefinitely, and so does our workload. Therefore, we need to prioritize some of the tasks if try to avoid them if they're not needed at all. Therefore, we can redeploy the resources, and also digitization and technology can help with our work processes, which I admit need to be strengthened. And the second question on the KPIs. Currently, the controller's officer report in our budget, there are indicators for each of the department and bureau's ambit, and we also will measure up against the KPI. As for, like Chairman has said, and the extent of digitization within the government, do we have any measurable KPIs? This can be discussed. In spite of this, well, this kind of KPIs would measure the government performance. If you zero into the individual civil servants, it very much depends on the appraisal mechanism. Thirdly, the Civil Service College are working with the Office of the Commissioner of the Foreign Ministry. Well, there we cater towards the civil servants. If the LegCo hopes to have a better grasp, I can talk to the FMOCR as to whether we should make the content available to the public. I believe that the FMOCR may have plans, OCMFA, to have their own plans to help the public to develop a deeper understanding of the work of the Foreign Ministry. And when a Hong Kong resident was in distress in other countries, then the Foreign Ministry is always there to help. Next, Mr. Jing. Thank you, Chairman and Secretary. Well, I would like to know about the civil service training, the latest development in the mainland, and national security law and the constitution and so on are important. As Hong Kong has become part of the GB program, there should be more collaboration and exchanges. And there will be more interaction between the civil servants on both sides. Well, for example, a lot of people in Hong Kong, like civil servants, they can't tell that the difference in seniority of different ranks in the mainland. We need to deepen knowledge of the bureaucratic structure in China. That's one thing. I hope that the civil service can be trained to develop a stronger service spirit to the public. And for example, in the IFC, this is an icon in Hong Kong. The footbridge connecting to the IFC is just the same as any footbridges connecting to the public housing estates. We can't stick to the lowest bidder in all cases. I know that the civil service will need to be whiter than white. If they do not adopt the lowest bid, they could be suspected of corruption. I know there's a reason for this. Well, for example, carry more colorful flowers and nicer trees in gardens, so at least that they could be pleasing visually, and so that they develop a stronger sense of satisfaction of the governance. Well, Mr. Ng talked about the bureaucratic structure in the mainland, and well as a policy formulation and implementation of measures. How does the mainland government work? We all need to know this. Well, to deepening the public understanding of the mainland is important. Hong Kong is quite different from the mainland. The mainland is huge with so many provinces and municipalities. From the formulation of policy to implementation at different levels, through regulations, and finally reaching to the individuals. The level of complexity, as you imagine, as opposed to a city of 7 million, is quite incomparable. Therefore, we need to know more about the mainland, especially on the GB development. We talk about policy innovation within the framework of one country, two system, to make sure there will be a normal flow of production factors. We have to know about the mainland institutions and the Hong Kong institutions, so that come up with innovative policies. Therefore, this should be a key focus of our training. Well, I very much agree that we need a stronger service spirit. We need to think from the public perspective. Therefore, we hope to cultivate design thinking. We have to consider from the user perspective on their service design, staffing, and practices. Well, during training for the senior civil servants, that required attendants to take a walk outside using wheelchairs, so as to know how difficult to go to different places. When planning for such facilities, they will develop stronger empathy for those in need. So these can be enhanced and should be enhanced. Mr. Ng not talk just about the service intelligence, also policy measures for the lowest bidder is a service procurement policy. For quite some time, due to Hong Kong political landscape, we were frequently on the defensive. We're afraid that we'll be attacked for this and that. Now, we aim to solve problems. We need to come up with more effective ways to do the same thing. This required a huge shift in thinking and required better coordination and backing. And that's why this is a key aspect of our training focus. Within this policy address, while we have listed out the requirements of the government team, these are the clear in the KPIs. And will this demonstrate the qualities we are looking for?
好，唔該晒局長。
Thank you, Secretary. And I thank the administration for taking part in the discussion of this item. We will now move on to item 4. That is non-civil service contract staff. Paper number CB bracket 457/2022 bracket 02. To allow members to speak in an orderly and fair manner, I will now instruct the staff to remove all the hands raised via Zoom. And members, you may now press the button again via Zoom. And then I will invite members to take turns to speak. I now invite Mr. Patrick Nip, Secretary for the Civil Service, to walk us through the paper. Thank you, members. Chairman. This paper reports to members on the latest situation concerning the employment of non-civil service contract staff (NCSC) by the government. We report to the panel on a regular basis the employment of NCSC staff, so I will briefly go through the paper with members. For non-civil service contract staff, these positions should meet 4 conditions. They are set up to cope with time-limited, seasonal, or jobs subject to market fluctuations. Second, they may involve service, the mode of delivery of which is under review or is likely to be changed. And third, the working hours of the manpower required for the work are less than the conditioned hours of civil servants. And number 4, for some of these positions, we may need to tap the latest expertise in a particular area of the labor market. So, if these 4 conditions are met, the department may consider recruiting NCSC staff to cope with the operational need of the department. Every year, the Civil Service Bureau would conduct a holistic survey with all the departments with NCSC positions. For employment situations as of the 2nd or the 30th of June 2021, there were 12,009 full-time NCSC staff. Compared with the historical peak as of the 30th of June 2006, there had been a reduction of about 35%. However, comparing to the same period in 2020, the number of full-time staff had increased by about 9%, or 980. The reason why the number of NCSC staff increased in 2021 was because some departments had to engage full-time NCSC staff to roll out time-limited or one-off large-scale tasks, such as the 2021 population census, allowance programs for newly introduced under the Community Care Fund for the low-income persons, as well as the COVID-19 vaccination program. Once these tasks are completed, these NCSC positions will no longer be required by the departments or bureaus concerned. Now, deducting the NCSC staff engaged under these 3 programs, overall speaking, the number of full-time NCSC staff engaged in 2021 dropped by 3% compared to the figure in 2020. On the whole, the departments may deploy additional staff having regard to the operational needs, and that the NCSC staff may be replaced subject to change in operational need. So far, 8,800 NCSC staff have been replaced by civil service posts. In 2021-2022, there had been 0 growth in the establishment of the civil service. So the number of NCSC positions that can be converted into permanent positions had not increased. However, we'll continue to keep in view positions with operational and service needs. I'll be happy to take questions from members. Thank you, Secretary. Let me read out the names of members who would like to speak for minutes. Mr. Zhao Shicheng, Chair Wei Chun, Ronnie Chan, Lai Tong Kwok, and Miss Elizabeth Quat, and myself. Mr. Zhao Shicheng. Thank you. Chairman, Secretary. Now I have a question on NCSC staff. As mentioned by the Secretary, NCSC positions are set up for tasks that are time-limited, seasonal, or subject to market fluctuation. Now, for positions with long-term operational and service needs, the NCSC positions should be replaced by permanent positions. And there is a mechanism, and I welcome that. I'm reading from the administration's paper. There are still some 3,000 positions that had been in existence for more than 5 years. So if these staff had been in the service for more than 5 years, wouldn't you say there is a long-term need here? It also hinges on the relevant civil service benefits. As you explained, the NCSC positions in terms of conditions of service should not be less favorable than those prescribed under the Employment Ordinance. At the same time, you've also imposed a ceiling. In other words, the remuneration of NCSC staff should not exceed the midpoint salary of permanent positions, and one can't help but question whether you're trying to create the problem of same work, different pay. So, Secretary, what is the basis on which you consider whether this position has a long-term operational need? And about the terms and conditions of service of NCSC staff, would you consider aligning those for NCSC positions with those of permanent civil service posts? First, we do keep in view the tenure of NCSC staff, and once the short-term need no longer exists, the NCSC position will either be scrapped or they will be switched to the permanent positions depending on the need. Now, the 3,380 NCSC staff are the number of staff members. 968, that is 30% of the staff, did not continue to hold the same NCSC position. Rather, they work in the capacity of NCSC staff within the civil service for more than 5 years, but at different positions. There are some tasks that cannot be replaced even due to long-term operational needs. Basically, for positions relating to trading fund, such as the EMSD trading fund or the Hong Kong Post, in 2021, the trading fund recruited 1,610 NCSC staff, and they had been in continuous service of 5 years or more. And we'll continue to keep in view the situation. About 20%, that is 745 staff members whose work is under review. That is, at the moment, we have yet to decide whether there is a long-term operational need. For example, the library services of LCSD, stage management at performance venues, venue management. These are circumstances under which some NCSC staff had continuous service of 5 years or more. On terms and conditions of service, the principle is that the terms and conditions should not be more favorable than those applicable to civil servants in comparable ranks. As for the midpoint salary rule, we have to, after all, define a range. So the range is pitched at the midpoint. So if you recruit a talent from the market, you consider the market situation and whether your remuneration package is attractive. And that is the basis we use. Will you scrap it? Now, for the guidelines and the indicators, these are in general needed. But under special circumstances, we can discuss with the bureau or department concerned. Of course, Mr. Chow, if you have any specific case or specific issue, you're welcome to approach us. Next, Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. I find it necessary to have NCSC staff in the civil service because of the nature of work. However, Secretary, can you first clarify this for us? Is it that your figures do not include statistics from the housing authority or hospital authority because they are not part of the civil service? Am I right? Second, I understand for some departments, they would engage service providers or agencies to provide manpower. So to this extent, these are contract staff as well, but they're not included in your statistics. Am I right? The third question relates to the following. For NCSC staff who had continuous service of more than 5 years, like Secretary explained, there are different factors to consider, and if the circumstances are appropriate, these positions will be converted into permanent civil service positions. My understanding is that the NCSC contract is subject to annual renewal. Since they in general have a longer tenure, can you have a contract of a longer horizon than 1 year so as not to cause any disruption? Thank you, Mr. Chair. The two HAs, one housing authority, the other hospital authority, right? These two organizations are not part of our civil service, and the staff are not civil servants. The other point is about recruitment through agencies, and the government signs contracts with the employment agencies concerned. So their staff are not civil servants, they're not NCSC staff. Now, will you disclose the figures since public money is involved? I'll go back and check. The other point about the contract period, Permanent Secretary? Chairman, Mr. Chair, for the contract period, it spans from 1 to 3 years depending on the operational need. So not every contract is subject to annual renewal. At the same time, we understand that there are positions with special needs. In general, departments would offer 1-year contracts. But depending on the progress, there may be a need to renew the contracts. The progress may be slower than expected, Hence, a renewal is necessary. But sometimes, in order to speed things up, they may offer 1-year contract. All right, understood. Well, Permanent Secretary, please follow up on this issue. Recently, I visited the Lands Department and the unit responsible for dealing with building plans. I understand that in that division, over 40% of the staff are NCSE staff. I think it affects the efficiency of the team, especially you do have construction plans on a regular basis.
再见议员。
Mr. Ronnie Chan. Mr. Ronnie Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Well, due to the complexity of some positions, I agree that as these positions could apply the NCIC scheme. According to the paper, well, 2006 there about 18,000 people. Well, during the 15 years, about 8,900 positions are converted into civil service posts. Well, in 2006, there's about 9,000-ish non-civil NCSC posts, and yet, in last year you employed over 15,000 NCSC staff. I see that the trend is actually on the rise. I hope that you can make the more fair comparison. According to Annex B, well, there's the employment of the NC staff by department breakdown. And remember, in EDB they have 12,092 NCC staff. In the EDB, can you explain why? And Annex C mentioned you hired 958 those with a professional knowledge, and mostly in the sales and marketing. Well, these talents are hard to attract. When they reported, whilst due to the operational need, can't you convert a civil service post so as to retain this talent? Well, take the ISD for example. The same caliber candidates are needed, and for Annex E, for the monthly salary of 30,000 or both, there are over 2,000. What is the highest salary of the NCSE staff, and in which and in what grade? I'll hand it over to the Permanent Secretary. Okay, let me answer the question on EDB. Well, EDB has various programs requiring NCSE staff. For example, like school janitors and clerks. Well, some of the EDB funding is not recurrent, but rather target-oriented. For example, enhancing capability and level in a certain area. Therefore, with this funding, they can hire people or procure supplies. While the funding may be time-limited, therefore they can only hire a time-limited employee. And well, in some cases, special needs. Let's say that let's say in government schools, need to develop certain areas. Let's say they want to hire some special staff. That's and these skills are not found within the permanent teachers in other grades. Therefore, they need to hire contract staff. And in some cases, the post is only needed for a few years instead of permanent. Therefore, the NCSE staff will be hired. Another question, Mr. Chen. What's the highest paid NCSE staff? In my answer to another member, Well, usually use the median of the comparable civil service position as the indicator. For the NCC's staff compared to the civil servants, well, for the ranks below the directorate grade, we will engage in NCC staff. As for the maximum pay, it could be just a rank below the directorate at the medium level. Well, they are more professional and with deeper expertise, therefore there are not many of these. Mr. Lai Tung Kwok. The focus of our discussion is limited by the scope of the paper. Just now, the Secretary mentioned there are under 4 scenarios that would allow the recruitment of NCSC positions. But we don't have any data on breakdown of each of the 4 scenarios. For the 5th category, of where the scenarios are not any of the 4. Well, if we know some of the know how many NCAC staff have served for a long time, as to match against the reason offered by the department for engaging NCC staff, I wonder if the Secretary would agree. When the department supplied the data to the Secretary, what approach we take to audit their data, and indeed a demand for NC staff is indeed legitimate. On controlling the size of the NCC staff, we have a maximum quota if they exceed the account need to apply to the CSB. And when do they exceed the quota? When they apply, they need to offer an explanation. For example, what are the staff for? Or what type of work are involved? Is that a seasonal or short than conditioned hours? Or the position is under review? If they will pass through the resource allocation exercise and need more resources to hire NC staff, they need to explain what these positions are for. Well, let's say if it's a time limited or seasonal staff or subject to market fluctuations, that we do know the numbers underneath scenario. If you have the numbers, can you make them public? Only by enhancing the transparency, the people will get to know more at how it works and with more confidence. Yes, sure. And after the meeting, I can supply the number of NC staff engaged on the 4 grounds. Well, if you have a cap, let's say a department let's get a quota to hire as they wish. Do we have server supervision? Let's say what are the NC staff recruited for? As time evolved, will they expect to change the establishment, the NCSC staff size? As for Mr. Lai's question, for the NCC staff, each department is given a cap that was really make reference to the department establishment as a proportion to the whole entire establishment. within the quota as for how the department recruit, and on such grounds is always involving the foregrounds as we mentioned, and they will let the department chief to justify. On the second level, on the overall civil service ranks, and I can produce a rough categorization on the breakdown of the number of NC staff hired for under each of the foregrounds. Well, the highest proportion is usually for seasonal or time-limited service needs. That's great. Well, we can gauge the situation better, and they will get to know the picture in detail. Next, Miss Elizabeth Quat. I would like to follow up on the seasonal lifeguards on contract. I know that each year we need to recruit 800 seasonal lifeguards as contract staff. Well, we never managed to fill the vacancies, and the beaches and the pools were frequently closed due to the lack of lifeguards. Let's say 2 years ago, some of the beaches were closed due to no lifeguards. However, they can't close off the beach while the public continued to swim there. There were over 10 drownings, death in these closed beaches. And some of the serving lifeguards have told us, even when you manage to hire the lifeguards, some of them are inexperienced, and they merely have the license and no sufficient training for them. Therefore, their life-saving ability is doubtful. Well, due to staff shortage, in case of any emergencies, not only would put the swimmer at risk, the serving lifeguards would need to face a greater hazard as well. This has been persistent for years. We received so many complaints that we discussed it many years in LegCo. Therefore, I urge a review on the whole LCSD lifeguard institution. The Korean Life Saving Organization urged a review of the grade structure review. You need to hire more lifeguards and hire less seasonal lifeguards to ensure there's a stable supply of lifeguards with sufficient experience. We can't evade the problem. I'm expecting a positive response, and we're talking about human lives at stake. Thank you, Ms. Quat. On Ms. Quat's question on lifeguards, I believe that we've discussed this at the past PSP meeting. Well, the SCSD and HBH are working on it, and the CSB have been talking to them. And for the serving lifeguards, on the terms of employment, or whether we should offer them any kind of allowances. Second, for the LSD swimming and leisure facilities, of the actual manpower demand, and how do we deal with the seasonal demand. Third, in the past, the lifeguards only responsible for patrolling beaches and pools, and some may need to dive. Let's say if there's integrated facilities, let's say whether that we should expand the duties of the lifeguards. The LCSD is currently undertaking a review and will monitor and follow up with them. Well, we only hire seasonal lifeguards. You can't compete with the private pools like in Ocean Park. Even if you offer better pay, you might hire experienced lifeguards. then led to the closure of lots of government pools and beaches. A lot of people complaining after building so many facilities and yet you aren't able to open them. I see this situation as serious. I hope you can give fuller account soon.
Right, we'll follow that up with the LCST. Next, my turn. Just now, some members mentioned the NCSC arrangements, and the purpose is to provide flexibility, but it is also our panel's duty to have oversight and make sure the kind of flexibility is not abused. My question is that at the moment the NCSC staff now talk about the length of continuous service. 7,470 work for less than 3 years, and 1,000 plus work for 3 to less than 5 years, and 3,000 plus work for 5 years or more. I looked up the previous question put to the Secretary in the electrical session. Now, of the 3,382 NCSC staff who worked for 5 years or more, how many of them had worked as an NCSC staff for more than 10 years? And about the 3,382 NCSC staff who had worked for more than 5 years, 967 of them worked at for different positions within the same department. I'd like to have details of these departments. Is it because these departments have a great variety of needs for these NCSC staff and that they have lots of NCSC positions to fill? And for the 967 NCSC staff, are they well-rounded so that they can just take up different NCSC positions in the same department? Or is it that the departments are trying to circumvent our oversight such that actually these NCSC staff just continue to carry out the same duties despite holding different titles? Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions. For staff who had worked for more than 10 years at different positions, there are 2,029 staff members. These NCNC staff are mostly under Hong Kong Post, EMSD, Department of Health, and LCSD. As you can see, for Hong Kong Post and EMSD, they operate a trading fund. Right, a trading fund, yes. The Hong Kong Post is responsible for sorting mails and delivery of mails, and their hours of work are less than the conditioned hours of civil servants, and therefore it is difficult to replace the NCSC staff with permanent staff. That accounts for the length of continuous service. In other situations, that's because of the positions under review or market fluctuations. Now, say for the Department of Health, I understand there are positions for taking temperature. I know that they're gradually shifting these posts to permanent civil service posts. It takes time, and that again accounts for the long periods of continuous service. I'll see if the permanent secretary has anything to supplement. My understanding is that for some NCSC positions, they are quite generic, and that the department sometimes have time-limited projects, and once a project is over, then the post would lapse, and at the same time another time-limited project may start, creating other NCSC permanent or rather NCSC positions, and these colleagues would then take up the other NCSC posts on a time-limited basis. But let me say that for NCSC positions converting into permanent civil service positions, they are not automatically converted. They do have an edge because of the experience, but they need to go through the open recruitment exercise again. And indeed, we have NCSC staff switching to permanent positions. Secretary, can you provide information about the 967 colleagues? Can you give us more details for our reference? I'm referring to 907 NCSC positions in different departments and how they've changed to different positions over the years. Right, I'll go back and see. I thank the Secretary, Permanent Secretary, and their team for participating in this item. Last agenda item, any other business? Nothing from me or from members. If that is the case, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.